Hi, everyone. My name is Ajay Ramachandran. I'm the founding partner at Happiness Ventures. We are a new venture fund, and we are investing in a lot of exciting companies. One of our portfolio companies is actually on the panel, and you'll hear from them as part of the discussion. I'm excited about moderating the panel today. We have a really incredible group of founders and CEOs of companies that are redefining healthcare and digital health as we know it. So if you're interested in talking to any of them about what they're doing, I'm sure many of them are hiring, and I'm sure many of them are also seeking capital. So feel free to connect with them after the panel discussion. Because we have a small group, we're going to make this pretty interactive. So if you have any questions or comments that you want to add into the discussion, kind of just raise your hand, and I'll try to incorporate you into the discussion as well. That way, we'll keep this fun and interesting for everyone in the audience. With that said, let me turn it over to my fellow panelists to introduce themselves. Everyone's going to give about a minute-long intro of their backgrounds and what their company does, and then I'm sure we'll hear more about each of their startups as the discussion progresses. All right, Jordan.
Great, thanks, Ajay. Hi, I'm Jordan Epstein. I'm the founder and CEO of Stroll Health. Stroll Health helps doctors and patients understand what's covered by insurance, what's nearby, what's available, how much care costs, and sends you to the best place at the right time at the right price. Kind of the whole experience is like Uber, Amazon, Expedia. We were just named by Robert Wood Johnson Foundation and Health 2.0 the best experience for choosing care in America, and we're commercializing right now with our first health systems, consumers and providers. I guess my background is I'm a geologist by training. I worked on nuclear power plants. I did earthquake hazards. So if anyone wants to talk about the transition from geology to healthcare technology, it happens a lot. I'm your guide. And then subsequent to that, I did a business intelligence software startup that was acquired. So great. Well, happy to be here. Happy to answer any questions.
Hi, my name is Dave Korsunsky. My company is called Heads Up. And we're solving the data fragmentation problem in healthcare. We fundamentally believe that digital health is changing the way people manage their health information. I come from the enterprise technology world. I was at VMware when I got really sick and for the first time had to take my health seriously. Started working with a number of different health practitioners. Some were within the pharmaceutical world, some were within the holistic integrative world, but managing all of the data became extremely problematic. So I built my own Ruby on Rails application to solve the problem for myself, screen scraping and parsing PDFs, and ultimately decided to commercialize it. And we're now integrating all of that data into Amazon AWS, medical records, patient-generated data, and then providing analytics back to the patient and to the practitioner. And I guess the most interesting part about the whole journey has been the type of people finding our product. It's actually, initially we thought this would be for data-oriented people, but the users of our product are actually the least technically savvy people you can imagine, but they're managing a chronic disease. I think it's interesting to see where digital health is going. It's actually helping people manage chronic disease through lifestyle modification, and that's been one of the most exciting insights. So looking forward to sharing more, and thank you for having me here.
Thanks, David.
Hello, I'm Siva, co-founder and CEO of Cocoon. My story started when I had my daughter, Lena, and as all parents do, went and bought a baby monitor and figured out that it's actually kind of useless. So I'm an engineer. I used to work at Tesla. Started experimenting with my daughter, started building radar and sonar to get my daughter's vitals. Then what I realized is that I didn't want to emit anything on her, so started experimenting with computer vision. So we have technology where we're able to extract a baby's respiration, their chest movement, without any wearables. And so it's all done with software and a little bit of hardware. So we just launched our product in Target last weekend, and Babies R Us is coming very soon. Initially we started with vital measurement, but now it's transitioning to what do you do with the data. So now we're starting to use the vitals, analyze sleep measurements, then slowly starting to track how the baby is developing over time. So this is what forgot to mention. Ajay, Happiness VC is our lead investor. So we just raised our Series A. So we're hiring now. Thank you.
Hey, good morning. My name is Tulla. I'm the CEO and co-founder at BetterDoctor. My story is a lot like the other ones. I left the fun world of video gaming and went to healthcare and into enterprise healthcare about 5 years ago. And we had some health family issues for over a decade with my wife, and had really hard time finding a provider, a right doctor, when we came to US 10 years ago. And we are still in the same journey. We have been doing many things. We first built consumer apps. I had about 20 million people using them. Now, last 2.5 years, we've been moving into B2B. And today, we are one of the powering engines of doctor data that is used by health systems, health plans, and many startups. We have about 2,000 developers using our API today and building innovative tools every day.
Hi, my name is Sushant Shanker. I'm a data scientist and engineer by training. I've worked in ad tech, e-commerce, scaling machine learning systems up to 1.2 billion users worldwide. I got into healthcare. I did my graduate work applying machine learning to computational biology. I was lucky to find a co-founder who's a professor at Stanford in cardiology. And he had a clinic that actually was able to reduce risk in a high-risk population about 10x better than anything else that's out there. So that was the inspiration behind Health House. It's to digitize both the better, taking guidelines and best practices and bringing that to the point of care, and being able to use this to find gaps in care for employers, for hospitals, and other tech companies. Thanks for having me in this panel.
Hey folks, my name is Shakil, founder, CEO of Augmedix. We've been at this for about 4 years. We're the first and largest Google Glass company. Yes, Glass is alive and well, but interestingly in the world of enterprise and especially healthcare. So we basically make software that runs on these glasses that saves a typical doctor about a third of his day. If you go see a doctor who doesn't wear Augmedix, typically it's a pretty sad experience. His back is turned, he's typing, he's clicking every now and then, he might look to you. Then he goes and runs off in his office and does even more of that. Well, our doctors, that's not what their lives are like. Our doctors simply put on glass. They have normal, engaging conversations with the patients in front of them. And all of their Epic, their Cerner, their EMR work is just seamlessly and effectively done in real time in the background. And we serve the doctor an array of services and content throughout the visit as well. We're live and active at a lot of different health systems that you surely know of. Your Sutters, your Dignities, your UCSFs, your Providences. And we're based up in the city. So happy to tell you all more about Augmedix throughout this time here.
Thanks, Ian. So that was great to kind of hear a little bit about everyone's backgrounds. I'd like the audience to share a little bit about their background, but I'm going to do that by a show of hands because we would never get through the panel otherwise. How many of you in the audience are here as a entrepreneur? Okay, so a lot of entrepreneurs in the group that are going to benefit from hearing your stories. How many of you are here as investors? Okay, so there's money in the room for those of you who are raising. Sushant, I thought I heard you say you were raising, right?
We are raising.
Yeah. So, and how many of you are here as potential job seekers? A couple. Okay. All right. So, and did I miss anyone? Academics, students, other? Couple of those, yeah. Okay, great. All right. So,
You missed.
what's that?
Consultants.
Consultants. Oh my gosh. Other.
There's always a consultant.
Bankers. Okay, bankers and consultants in the room too. So, a couple incubators too. Fantastic. Good. Okay, great. Well, that's great to see kind of the varied audience that we've assembled here today to hear from this panel of experts on their entrepreneur's journey. So why don't we kick things off? Tell us a little bit about how you guys actually got started. Like, what was the kernel of inspiration, the moment of truth where you said, that's the thing that I'm going to do? And tell us a little bit about that moment, how you got started. Did you find a co-founder? How many pivots did you have along the way? Who wants to take that one on first? Ian.
I'll go first. I feel like Augmedix's founding is almost like a cartoon Silicon Valley type experience. Well, I went to Stanford, and that was fateful because that's where I met my co-founder. I was in business school, he was in med school, and against all odds, we became friends, but we didn't know exactly what we wanted to do or how we were going to go about doing it, but we wanted to do something in startups. So I graduated in 2012. Pelu stayed in med school. He had 1 year left, and we were just sort of keeping in touch. And I started working in another startup. I was kind of off into the races, and then I was hanging out casually in Dolores Park with friends, some of which were Googlers, and some of which were Google Xers. And in their backpack, one of them had something they weren't supposed to have, which was Google Glass. And they told us, you can't take a picture, you can't tell anyone, this is very bad of me to have this outside of Google, but it's okay. Try it on, let me know what you think. And no one at the time had heard of Glass. So we're all sitting here playing with this device, pretty wowed by it, it's pretty cool at the time. And when it came to me, I was playing with this and I'm like, you gotta be thinking about healthcare, right? Doctors and all these applications, that was my prior life. And he was saying things like, no, we're thinking like dads and selfies and GoPros and like parks and stuff. I'm like, that's really cool. I'm sure that's gonna work. I'm happy for you, but doctors. So we got into a big argument. I became obsessed. A few weeks after that, I quit my job that I just started and founded Augmedix. And Pelu dropped out of medical school. He was a fourth year. His mom really had it out for me. And we together built the company up formally in late 2012 and grown it ever since. Today we actually have over 1,000 people working for Augmedix in various places. Most of those folks are in India and Bangladesh, and there are these scribe teams that we now employ.
Fantastic.
It's a great story. My story was started when I was in grad school. I decided to work in the School of Medicine, do research in the School of Medicine instead of the regular computer science department. And that was great because really got into understanding how to apply technology, in particular machine learning, to genetics and genomics. What I realized in that process was not only did I not want to go into academia, but also that I wanted to do something that intersected these two fields, biology and technology. I didn't know yet that it was medicine. Fast forward a few years later, I was lucky enough to meet Raj, my co-founder, who had done some fantastic work in not only the research aspect of medicine, but also bringing that to practice, bench to bedside. And I was fascinated by the work he'd done. I was looking for a domain expert, someone who not only understood how to practice medicine, but also be in the cutting edge and understood workflows and understood the ecosystem in the market. And I'd done startups before, my own, and been part of different startups, so it was a natural fit. And it's been a great partnership for almost 3 years.
That's great. Well, it sounds like you really found a co-founder with very complementary skill sets and really help you balance out the team. Yep. That's great.
Like I said, my kind of initiation started from the kind of pain that we had on navigating the healthcare with my family, but more on a concrete way. We started, I think, 2011, late with my co-founder. We were both at Nokia at the time, and we were pretty unhappy about the factor that Nokia had just selected to go with the Windows Phone. I think we all know how well that ended up going. So, and I was involved in the decision a little bit, and my co-founder was heavily fighting against it to go with Android. So that decision we lost, and we decided to leave, and we left in the right time, and started to build the healthcare. And I think, my co-founder was head of technology at Nokia Innovation, and I was running Nokia's game and app studios. And we thought that we have a lot of understanding on building the consumer experience, and I think we did that really well in the beginning. But now in the last, few years, I mean, it's been kind of funny to go from, I'm a consumer guy, I've been building those things for 20 years, and I had no idea about enterprise. So it's been a big learning curve to go from B2C to B2E and learn to work with companies like Humana and Anthem and Blue Cell California and United Healthcare and others. And it's a very, very different world, and it moves very slowly. And in the process, we had to change almost the whole team in order to be able to do that. So there's a lot of stories on that.
My story, obviously, as I said before, started with my daughter. I'm a hardware engineer, so I started building hardware to do computer vision. What I realized is that it was quite expensive. that's when I met my co-founder, Pavan. He specializes in obviously computer vision, but also he has done lots of cloud infrastructure and things like that. So what we realized is that we could use off-the-shelf cameras that are already readily available and transfer our algorithms to the cloud and create a cost-effective solution that we can actually sell to consumers. So the way I met him also is kind of a story. So while I was doing all of this, I used to attend hackathons on the weekends. And so since I was trying to build hardware, I was just trying to learn how to do computer vision. So basically my goal was to go and learn computer vision from somebody who knew computer vision. And so he pitched some idea of putting ads on like YouTube videos when there's like a Coke can and putting a Pepsi ad. But then after we started developing everything, I told him about the idea that I had and how impactful it can be for consumers. We completely changed, and so we built out this Cocoon camp basically, and so it's been a great journey since now we can actually see parents, telling us how much time they're saving, how much peace of mind that they're getting. So it's nice to see that it started from me and my wife having a problem to now everyone experiencing peace of mind. So that's been a good journey, and Ajay and Curtis have been helping us since a year now. So,
Yeah. Well, it's been fun to watch that journey. We weren't there as early as when they were trying to put ads on Coke cans with augmented reality, but I've been big believers in that vision since then. But it's funny to see how you can have a wildly different idea as a co-founding team and end up somewhere completely different once you really get down to the heart of what is driving you and motivating you and where your passion lies.
And now, not only that, now it started with babies. We're doing studies at Stanford at the NICU. Now, doing experiments on how to take a consumer electronic device to a medical grade, and that's where the journey is going.
Cool.
So I don't think I've ever shared this detail publicly, and this happens to be on camera. But
Juicy. I like it. Nice.
Does anyone remember the P90X workouts? Okay.
Sure.
So I get my creative juices when I'm exercising, and I was at home doing the Yoga X workout, and just went into this Zen state, and I had to go pause the DVD and go into my home office, and I just wrote this whole vision for this product on my whiteboard. And fast forward a year later, I actually needed to go build it for my own health issue. And that was right around the time that the government was doing this meaningful use program where they were incentivizing doctors to move from paper records to patient portals, and you could qualify for reimbursement. So it was right around that time that all the doctors' offices had APIs available. Whether the doctors realized it or not, the patient portal had an API. And that's when I realized that for the first time in history, we're now able to get clinical data out of the EHR systems, where it largely sits underutilized, and be able to pull that out electronically and make good use of it and start to analyze it in different ways. And it was a little bit of serendipity, but one of my good friends at the time had spent 5 years working at Epic, which I think is a record, he told me, in terms of tenure at Epic. But he knew the electronic health records world inside and out, and we started looking into this. And with each passing year, there's more coverage of health systems that have APIs, so being able to get the data out. Once I realized that that was technically possible, no more paper records, no more forms, no more CDs in the mail, that's when I realized that this could be something very significant, and that's how we started down the path.
Great.
Great, thanks. And my story, this is Jordan again. My story is not too different from Ian's story, but instead of randomly meeting a med student at Stanford, I dated a med student from Stanford, and we would talk about these problems about why is healthcare so expensive, why and then basically I would ask hey, if I'm one of your patients and you tell me to get a blood test, like where can I go? And she goes, well, I just send you down the street to to Stanford, right? And I'm like, well, do you know how much that costs? And she goes, I have no idea, right? And it ends up being Stanford is one of the most expensive places you can go. So, case in point, I had a word on my elbow. I didn't care. She cared. She said, let's go to the doctor. I went to the Palo Alto Medical Foundation. The primary care doctor sent me to a dermatologist, froze off the ward in 5 minutes. Great, great success story. A month later, I got a bill. That bill was for $512, an hourly rate that's $6,000 an hour, which is a quarter of the cost of spaceflight on SpaceX. And since I'm on a high deductible plan and a starter plan, I paid for it, right? So the next time I went back to that doctor, who's the head of all primary care at PAMP, he doesn't even see patients anymore. He goes, Jordan, you should get a blood test. I'm like, all right, man, let me tell you a story. How much do you think this is going to cost? And this doctor, instead of being, no, just go get it, gets visibly angry. He gets upset. He clenches his fist. He shakes a little bit, furrows his brow. He goes, you know what? You're not going to get the blood test. And in my mind, right, that's crazy, right? You're changing your medical recommendation because I asked you how much something costs. We don't know the answer, right? And so from that insight, there's a problem for this gal that I love, right? This doctor, and for me forever, and no one is solving this problem, right? I'm a geologist, but after that I did business intelligence software. I worked with United Healthcare and Kaiser, integrated all these different applications, brought together all these different silos of data. We can solve this problem, and we are solving this problem. That's how we started Stroll.
Nice. How did you go from geology to make the big leap to tech? That's not a typical path.
Yep. So I'm on a nuclear power plant in Utah, and I'm talking to these group of geologists, and I'm like, I think maybe I want to have a family sometime. This is great. This is interesting, but I really want to help people. I want to see them helping people. I want to do it in a way that scales. I'm not sure if this is the right thing for me. And I'm dating this Stanford gal, and they go, that's great. Geology is really great. You should stick with geology. And this is the first time in my life that I went to this small liberal arts school called Carleton College. Everyone loves each other. Great advice, right? So I'm like, okay, well, group of geologists. There's got to be good advice. So I fly back to California. I tell my girlfriend, hey, we got to break up. I go back to the nuclear power plant. I'm upset. She's upset. 3 days later, she flies back. Surprises me. I'm like, that was the worst decision of my life. Quit being a geologist. Decide that I want to do software. I think that's something that can scale and really help people. And then this is a great story. Okay, well,
I love it.
So I apply to 100 different startups, right? And they all reject me. Right? And one of the ones that rejects me sends me a letter and goes, Dear Mr. Epstein, I don't know if you read the job description. You don't have any of the skills that we're looking for. But I've always wanted to be a geologist. That's so cool. I've never seen a geologist apply for anything in 20 years, right? And so I send this to my sister, and my sister goes, Jordan, you just got to write back and say, I want to do software at your company, and here's why. They ended up being like, this guy's persistent. Let's call. So they've already rejected me. They can call me back and say, okay, we'll give you an interview. They end up bringing me in. I meet with the VP of engineering and all of these engineers. I gave a presentation on my senior thesis on plate tectonic motion in Alaska 60 million years ago, and they hired me to be a software engineer. So that's
lovely. Great. Persistence being key there, and the moment of realization that being a geologist wasn't necessarily the most lucrative financial path, but yeah, that's always a hard decision. I had a similar moment in my life when I started out my career as well, so totally relate to that. So very interesting kind of origin stories, right? That's kind of the superhero story here. Tell us more about some of the early challenges that you guys faced when you were getting started. Entrepreneurism is fraught with challenge, friction. It's not an easy journey or path. There are many times that you want to quit, just give up. It's just hard. So share some of those tough moments that you guys experienced as you were building your startups, and what kind of made you persist? What made you continue to go for it?
We don't have to go in a line, but I'll start, and then we can just
jump in.
But so I have a couple of stories, and I think Ari is going to probably share many of these because we ended up winning a competition put on by one of the insurance companies, one of the blues, to about reducing the cost of care. Great, we had this great application. They gave us a bunch of money, and then we spent more than a year, working with them to try to pilot this technology, to try to do it with them. I flew out there, met with 9 VPs. 3 of them are named Mike. Right, everyone loved it, and at the end of the day, they didn't do anything. Right. And that's one of the really frustrating things. Is like, come on, man! Like, you've been saying we had weekly meetings, that you're going to do this thing. It is like fundamentally great for your company, right? It's great for your patients, it's great for your providers, it's great for you, and yet in healthcare that doesn't mean anything, right? In healthcare, the way to sell things in healthcare is who is the guy that you're talking to? What's their problem? What's their budget? Right? What's their sales cycle like? Can you fit into them? Can you get them to sign a contract? And can you deploy in a way that's easy? Right? And I think Ari's going to talk probably more about that. We've had the same thing with health systems. We have contracts on the line for sometimes 6 figures, maybe 7 figures. Literally, it's we have the potential to save. We have a similar product to Kairos. Graham, the CEO of Kairos, goes to these health systems and says, we can save you $1 billion a year, right? Or we can make you an additional $1 billion in revenue a year, right? And it doesn't even matter what you say because they still don't buy it, right? It's like, what do you want me to say? I can cure cancer. And they still won't buy that, right? So it's really these sales cycles are so frustrating. And then it's like, why do you keep persisting? It's because you really think that you have a solution, at least for me, that can change the world, that can really, really help people. So that's it's mostly been sales. One of the great things about healthcare is that you get amazing people that want to work on these problems because they're real problems. They really can help people. They're intellectually challenging. They're interesting. Those sorts of things. But sales is really frustrating.
I'll take a cue on that, Soren. So I think first kind of interesting story I think is that you start a company, you want to build it with the people that you know. You're going to hire people you trust, people that you've been working before. And I assembled a pretty good team of about 6-7 people in the beginning, and we go fundraise. We had the luxury of kind of spending our own money in the beginning, so we were able to build the first product early on. And then we go fundraise, and everybody is saying like, why would you want to do this? Like they're trying to talk us out of it. And they look at the team and like, you guys are really, really great team, build games. I'm happy to find that was like the first peak of mobile gaming. Like you have like an all-star team, build mobile games. We're gonna give you money immediately.
Go be a geologist, right?
Yeah, like don't do the healthcare, do the games, and we're gonna give you money. I'm like, no, I want to do this thing. I'm kind of committed to this already. So that was kind of funny, and then when we ended up raising more, and then I think the kind of the surprising point for me came when we were trying to be a renegade in the beginning. We were trying to say that we're gonna change the healthcare by building tools that are gonna give transparency, and we're gonna say no to the health plans. We're gonna say no to health systems. You don't know what you're doing. We're gonna make the consumer experience much better. And I think we were doing that in many ways, but at the same time, the people that were the industry, the incumbents, they were looking at us as idiots. And we hired 25 people in the team with nobody having any healthcare experience. And that's a little bit like the Trump cabinet, I think, today. It was pretty hard to build anything in the end when we were moving it into enterprise and P2P. How do you monetize? People are like, well, we have no idea. Like, who's paying? We have no idea. Like, how much is it ask? We have no idea. So that was not a very smart thing to do, and I can totally, on hindsight, say that don't do that. Now we are more like half the people from healthcare with 20 years experience and so forth. And I started some years ago to convert my mind of being a renegade to being an embracer. So I'm hugging the market. And people always ask me like, can you build moats and the walls? And I'm saying like, I'm a boat builder. I'm building boats through the moats. And it's been much easier now to be able to kind of get deals done and so forth. But it's still frustrating. The sales cycles are long, and there has to be an urge. There has to be a need. It's like you can't initiate a need in a big organization. And for our kind of luck in the last 2 years, there's a law that is mandating many players in the industry to make sure that their doctor information is accurate. And we happen to have a good solution for that. And so we've been dragged in the market, and people are pulling us into deals. And that's rare, but it requires that there's something unique happening in the market. Like the normal idea, I'll stop in a second, but the normal idea of product market fit. Fail forward quickly. That's in enterprise healthcare. It's not going to work. I mean, you can read the book 10 times, but it won't help you.
Yeah, I'll share a few thoughts here from my own experience. I think some of the challenges were, first of all, coming out of a long career in the corporate world, working in technology, where everything is very predictable. Your paycheck is very predictable. Your health insurance is very predictable, and there's a defined way of operating. Going into a startup where it's completely unstructured, you largely have no idea what you're doing. In hindsight, you have to be very naive and borderline crazy to get into it. And I think some of the things that have been most helpful for me were just realizing that you really have to be in love with the problem you're solving to stick through some of the tough times. And I think also learning how to be comfortable being uncomfortable. There's no roadmap, there's no instruction manual. It's really just some days going to bed defeated and some days feeling on top of the world, and really just being able to manage your emotions, manage your psychology, most importantly, and being able to take care of yourself physically, mentally through the journey so that you can ride this thing out. I think those are some of the most important things that have helped me get through the tough times.
Well, and I think that's such an important point, that being an entrepreneur is really very stressful, not only on the entrepreneur, but the family as well. And that leads to a lot of challenges. So having kind of the right mindset going into it and being able to manage those emotional highs and lows, because you're going to experience both extremes and often in the same day, that being able to roll with those punches is really key to lasting and being a sustainable entrepreneur. And for those of you, who are leaving corporate to go be an entrepreneur, talk to David about it, because that is a big left turn. It's 180 degrees opposite from what you're used to. And so that phrase that you see in all of those job descriptions, self-starter, must be motivated, right? That's really key. And 100x, 1000x, and borderline crazy in a startup for sure. Any other comments on challenges? And yeah, go for it.
I can take that. So continuing that story, I've faced, two sons. One is family. I had one daughter already, and my wife was pregnant, and then I decided to quit my job and losing this steady healthcare and paycheck and whatnot. How do you navigate that? I would say is one of the hardest things in the beginning of the company stages. It's almost like, okay, so you've made this decision, do you keep going this way, or how do you even stop it, and then slowly building the team, succeeding, and seeing how all the hard work that you've put in now is coming to fruition is a nice feeling, but it was definitely difficult in the beginning. The other thing, on at least specific to my company, is my background is specifically hardware, and I've built hardware many times. Then analyzing the problem and looking at it and realizing that obviously getting into hardware and custom building something is going to be very expensive, and realizing that and then starting to figure out how not to do that, and navigating with the limited funding that you have so that you can actually build a product that's successful and you can actually launch with the limited seed funding that you have. I think that was very important the way we did it. If you look at all of our competition, everyone's making custom hardware devices. We are the only ones that don't make custom hardware, but everything is done in the software. I'd say that was one pivotal thing that we did.
At Augmedix in the early days, I like to think of those times as just a series of relentless hacks, and I like to tell people about them. I hope it can inspire them to what is possible. When we first started, we didn't even own a Google Glass device. We literally 3D printed one, and we rigged up clinic rooms with audiovisual equipment and did patient acceptance studies and all kinds of workflow simulations without even Google even giving us one of these. So you can accomplish a lot with just some really cool Wizard of Oz techniques. We didn't have any money. We did crazy things with crowd lending to even get any dot of cash. People like Ann would tell us we're building for Silicon Valley doctors. So we took crazy road trips to Texas and just went down the country highways, visiting one doctor to the next and asking them for feedback, putting glass in doctors and patients and collecting survey results. You can be really surprised at what you can accomplish with just hack and relentless and moonshot behavior and no money. And in many cases, not having money drives you to do some of these crazier things.
Absolutely. Money is sometimes a very defocusing luxury where you raise too much, suddenly you can try everything at the same time, and becomes incredibly distracting. But when you don't have any money, you're typically laser focused on accomplishing that next key step milestone that's going to get you more progress and more traction. I think that's so true. And another kind of interesting point that I think I'm hearing through some of the comments from the panelists is this notion or this idea of being naive, of not having industry expertise and knowledge, of trying something completely different, being called an idiot. That's really interesting kind of when you think about the pattern that each of these entrepreneurs have gone through and experienced in their industry. Many of them have entered this industry without the expertise and background. In some cases, they've co-founded with others that have had the background. But an important kind of insight through my career is that oftentimes when you don't know what you don't know, that's when you have complete creative freedom to invent something new. You have no boundaries, no restrictions. You have nothing holding you back because you don't have any knowledge. You don't know who the payers or the providers are in healthcare. You don't know how it works. So you're like, I'm going to do something completely different. I'm going to reimagine it the way it should be done. And that freedom is sometimes incredibly liberating and transformative. Of course, at some point along that journey, you also need to kind of figure out how to integrate into the existing ecosystems and environments and figure out how you're going to make that buck eventually. But I think it's an interesting point that we're hearing across the panel. Sushant.
Yeah, no, great stories, great points. I just want to, I think one of the hardest things is when you know what needs to be and how it needs to work. And for us, we knew that we were able to drive outcomes. We spent a lot of time doing that. It's sometimes very frustrating to know how to take that into other ecosystems or other players or companies. And so I think it's just patience and methodically being able to say, what are the steps making progress towards that? And like many of the people here, being able to try lots of different things until it works. And just continually making progress and doing it step by step. The strategy is going to change, the tactics are going to change, but as long as you have that true north, that's what will drive you and will keep driving you forward.
That's great. Let's switch gears for a moment. Several of you mentioned that there are some market forces that are enabling you to build your businesses. Regulatory changes, new laws that are making it possible for you to be in business and to monetize, that are pulling you into the market. Share with us a little bit about that, about how you're riding kind of the regulatory changes or new laws, and how that's either benefiting you or hurting you. And feel free to also comment on kind of the current DC landscape and some of the uncertainty around ACA, and well, maybe less uncertainty now than there was a week ago. But how is that all shaping kind of the strategy that you're following as a startup?
I'll jump in quickly. So, the High-Tech Act and other activities dramatically fueled EHR adoption from, 10% 5-7 years ago to majority of doctors are now using an EMR. And many companies, including Augmedix, that creates a market, that creates a pain point for doctors and other folks and stakeholders, and it creates solution space for companies like Augmedix. So we greatly benefit from that. Interestingly enough, that initiative is bipartisan, and it should be, and it's good. And then you asked about sort of the Washington, D.C. climate. It so happens that Augmedix is sort of indifferent, regardless of which left or right direction health policy goes. I don't know that that's the same of all healthcare startups, and maybe there's some diversity on this panel. On some level, on some level, I guess that means there's a little bit of a flight to companies that are indifferent, like Augmedix. So I guess I benefit from that, and I'm grateful and lucky to be in that position. I do feel a little bit for our health system customers. I feel like they are a bit confused, and they might have a feeling like they should stand down from adopting things in general or spending on things in general until things just settle and smooth, and their bar gets higher and their filter gets higher. So for younger, innovative companies wanting to just get face time with health system purchasers, I feel like they're just getting closer and closer to the bleachers these days, while they just kind of figure things out, and they're even financially struggling themselves through all of this, and it makes them less able to spend on anything possibly extraneous.
I'll add to that. I think that the regulatory change has been one important piece, but that in and of itself has not been enough. I think being able to get access to the EHR systems and unlock the data, that's important. But without equal changes among the consumer landscape and among consumer readiness to start using digital health technology, if we would have unlocked the EHR data 5 years ago, before all of the digital health startups had come out and all of the awareness around self-tracking and all of the market readiness had been there, I don't think we would have been successful. So for us, it's a combination of three things. One, it's some of the technological barriers that have come down. Two, it's the fact that digital health is now starting to move beyond just the novelty and actually into chronic disease management. And we're seeing people increasingly who are chronically sick and lower income using this technology. So there's a market readiness that is happening along with it as well. So for us, it's kind of a few different factors coming together at the same time that are making it possible. Some on the consumer, some on the regulatory.
Great. Go ahead, Jordan.
Yeah, and I'll just jump in and echo kind of what everyone said. First, my company is also kind of indifferent, but in being indifferent might actually benefit because, well, one, because others might suffer, but two, if people have less health insurance and healthcare costs go up, then you want a solution that can help reduce the cost of care, and we're in the position to do that. So that's a good thing. Again, I think, I've seen the same thing that Ian has in terms of the providers, kind of taking a step back. I think it is really, really hard to sell the health systems. And I think if you don't have that experience or someone on your team with that experience, so if you look at the new companies that are being successful today, what I see is, they're being spun off of, Intermountain or Providence, with $10 million seed or Series A checks with no product, but they have that partnership in place where they have that credibility to then go forward, or with Cedar Sinai or those sorts of things. So that's kind of what I've seen, because otherwise you're in this kind of, holding pattern on the bleachers, whatever you want to say. And then kind of to DC, kind of to echo, what you've said, I'm sure everyone's frustrated, but I'm frustrated that the conversation has been about who pays. Is it rich people? Is it poor people? Is it states? Is it the federal government? But there are real problems. The real problem is that healthcare costs too much. It's continuing to go up, and who pays for that doesn't matter. We need to have legislation that works on those things. And to kind of your point again, like, how do you solve those problems? Some of it is this value-based care stuff and kind of continuing what the ACA has done there. But then also some of it is this consumerization and requiring tools or transparency or competition, or these things that, honestly, providers in large health systems have been in their ivory tower. And if anyone's from a large provider system, you're in your ivory tower. And you drive the cost of healthcare in this country. It's not the mom and pop docs. It's not everyone here that's trying to find affordable healthcare.
For us, I think the EHR way was something that we thought will help us dramatically to be able to build better access. We were thinking that now everybody are going to go online. We will see APIs. We're going to see online scheduling, for example, becoming something that everybody has. I talked to most of the big vendors in the space, and they said that, yeah, we're going to build the scheduling component. It will be used. We're going to have APIs, all the stuff. And then what happened is that people were adopting really quickly, and we went from 10% to 50% to 70% or whatever, and everybody had to buy something, and they were buying a product that was pretty bad at the moment, or at the time, and still pretty bad today. And if you talk to EMRs today, they still have like 5 different feature requests, like, you need to get getting the benefit of getting the money back, the meaningful use money. That was the number one thing. Let's build something to get the meaningful money back to the doctors. Most people felt that. And then you had different ideas, like, getting the data moving back and forth, making it better, working with scribes, all this stuff. Online scheduling was like 6 or 7 features on the list, and they never got to it. So it took 5 years, and none of them have really done it even today. None of them work properly. Like, such a simple thing, but like, we impose laws that people have to adopt something, and then the EMR providers don't even build things like notification to the provider if a patient booked an appointment online. I mean, that makes it completely impossible to do that. And then you can't trust if it really went through or not. So those are simple details that were kind of surprising to us, because we were outside. We didn't know that people won't adopt these things. But today, frankly, I mean, for our company, for example, we are now operating some of the health exchanges, the infrastructure behind it. And if Obamacare goes away, I think those exchanges are going to die, and that business goes away. There are probably 100 companies who build those and operate those, and it's a multi-billion-dollar industry, and that will be basically going away if ACA would have been ceasing to exist. So we were kind of looking at pretty excitedly, and we had our team in Washington last week, like, what can we do? Can we pull some levers? And let's see what happens in the medium term. But it is pretty scary if your company is not online completely, but if some of your revenue is online because of some lawmakers making decisions you can't really impact as a small startup.
So for us, it's been quite positive overall because with MIPS and MACRA, and move to value-based care, certainly that move is going to take some time. But the progressive players and early adopters, what they're doing is they are being forced, in a sense, to make more of their contracts and more of the revenue to be value-based. For us, a lot of those value-based contracts and those guidelines are based on guidelines and based on clinical guidelines in particular. So for us, that actually helps provide even more economic incentives beyond the operational and the outcomes-based incentives to something that's directly tied to reimbursement. Now, the challenge is, although we're not directly affected by the legislation, we have seen, especially for providers who don't want to make a decision because until they see what's happening or until they see what pans out. And there's a lot of providers who say, hey, we'll just take the hit for the reimbursement or the penalties because they're not as big this year. This year is a test year. So there's if you're doing a startup in healthcare, you will be affected because your customer will be affected. But it depends on whether you're doing the cost aspect of it, the access, or the quality.
So let me jump in with two kind of rapid fire questions before we wrap up. One, I want to give each of you a chance to describe kind of your current status in terms of funding and funding needs so that the investors in the audience can approach you or talk to you if it's relevant. And also kind of as a second question, which we'll get to, but keep this in mind when you ask for your ask. I'm also going to ask you to share kind of what's been frustrating or positive about raising money from VCs. What's gone well, what have you liked and disliked? Have you met any terrible VCs along the way? Feel free to dish a little bit for the entrepreneurs in the audience. But let's start with the first question. How much have you raised, Jordan, and how much are you raising going forward?
Great. Stroll's raised less than $1 million. We've received a number of grants from Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, from Stanford, from the Blues. We also on Friday got an acquisition offer, so we're at this interesting. We can choose to exit or we can raise more money. So it's a great. It's always good to have the optionality. What's interesting is that I've met with many investors in the Valley and elsewhere. And what we're trying to do is this big thing in healthcare. And my advice to entrepreneurs out there is don't do that. Do something very small. Do something that basically you can get someone to purchase to show traction. Because I don't care what all the investors say about do something big and whatever. They don't invest in that. Not if you're a young person. Not if you don't have a track record. What they invest in is traction and revenue. So do something that literally copy somebody else. Get some traction, and then you can do something interesting.
That's a very depressing way of looking at things.
Well, I'm just telling you the reality of healthcare investing. So that's what it is.
And Jordan, how much are you raising going forward? Did you mention that, or do you have plans if you don't get acquired?
Yeah, we'll probably raise $1 to $2 million. So if that's something that's interesting to someone, come up and say hi.
Okay.
Yeah, on our side, we're in the middle of raising our angel round of $350,000. We've closed the first 50% of that, so another 175 left to go on the angel round. I think we've had most of our success just reaching out to individuals who understand the space we're working in, who understand and believe in us as founders. That's the easiest way for us to get our early capital. I think that the very first startup forum I ever went to was in San Francisco, and it was one of the founders of AngelList. And I still remember the advice you said, the best way to raise money is not to have to need any fundraising money. And so we've actually tried to raise as little as possible and just stay extremely lean. To your point earlier, it's more stressful, but it forces incredible clarity in terms of what you do. And so that's actually been a benefit to us. And I think we'll continue down that path until we do have some more traction on the revenue side and then start to potentially look at a larger round. But we've kept it very lean so far.
Great. Yeah. If you're a revenue generating company and in a position where you don't have to actually raise, it gives you a tremendous amount of leverage. Another piece of advice relative to fundraising is I was told early on in my entrepreneurial career, about 23 years ago now, that you should never ask for money. Ask for advice. If you ask for advice, you'll probably get money. If you ask for money, you'll get advice. So,
Sage advice.
Yeah, that sort of might help some of you along the way.
So we've raised, we just closed our Series A, led by Ajay's Happiness Ventures. We've closed so far $5 million. A lot of that, in the beginning stages, we went through accelerators and had very little money to, as you say, go crazy and try all these things. So it made us make very intelligent decisions. And then now that we have our Series A, we can, as we scale, the options are much better.
Sure.
You can hire people, you can, get specific things that you want to do and exactly give the customer what they want, and as we move forward, that's how you get paid back, I feel. When customer calls you and says, "Hey, this was awesome."
Yeah, that's very gratifying. How many accelerators, incubators, and grants and things did you go through? Because you did a lot of that.
Right. So our first funding was through the National Science Foundation. We got $50,000, and that was to test our algorithms that we had developed. Then we went through. Our first accelerator was Highway 1. They invested in us, and so they helped us through all the hardware prototyping. Then we went through Berkeley Skydeck, and most recently Tech Code here in Mountain View. So we've been through a bunch. but after you have some traction, there's always ways to negotiate.
Yeah, so you can bounce around between accelerators, graduate from one to the next,
Right.
and get the support you need as you build your business. Ari.
We have raised about 30 million, and really I think VCs are. I mean, it's like dating today. I don't know much. I've been with one lady for 20 years, but what I hear is that it's more about the numbers game to find the right person. I think the VCs, it's hard to know as an entrepreneur who are the right people. You can talk to people, but in the end, you need to find the right match. I think we found some really good ones and some not so good ones along the way. And I think today we have a very good board. We have a really good investors. I think we are very focused on one thing. We are getting close to profitability this year. I think we might even get there in Q4. Next year, I think we will become a real company that we likely will be profitable if everything goes well next year, and hitting the 9 whatever figures there will be or 10 million revenue next year. So that's a real company in my mind already. And next, I think if we're probably gonna raise more money to build another business line. So really focus on stabilizing the one you are doing today, making it profitable, focus unit economics, grow the team. We'll likely hit 100 people next year as well, so it's a big milestone. And then maybe focus on another business line. If we do that, then we will probably go on the market and raise a lot more money. But it depends on that and how do we gonna see.
So Ajay, can I ask you for some advice?
Nice.
No, I like that motto.
See, someone was listening.
Oh yeah. So we have raised about a little less than 2 million so far. We're raising a seed extension to execute on some commercial pilots and POCs. We spent a lot of time in the first 2 years getting clinical trial data to show that our product is not only real in the clinic, but also is better than anything else that's out there. But happy to talk to anyone about it offline.
Augmedix has raised $65 million to date. Most of that money comes from 5 major investors: Emergence, DCM, Red Mile Group, McKesson Ventures, and OrbiMed. I struggle to really find and give you advice that's sort of non-obvious and not Googleable. I guess I will just relate that I'm so surprised at the dramatic differences between one firm and the other, and one partner and the other, in terms of just ethics and intelligence and value add and just relatability. As discerning as you are, be more discerning. And I think very high things about our board, for what it's worth. And there's several firms out there that have tarnished reputations, and all of those firms that you are thinking of now, all that's actually very true, and you can determine that by talking to other entrepreneurs. Another thing that we've done at Augmedix is pretty unique is most of our customers have invested in the company. So your Sutters, your Dignities, your CHIs, your TriHealths, they're significantly venture invested in the company. And there I can say, I can give you some unique advice. It can be very good and very healthy and very synergistic if you let that happen in the right kind of a way. I think the key is to have plural. The key is to have more than one to create scarcity in a moment of entry, and then at that point make sure that there's all kinds of commercial desire around the table. You're not giving out outrageous side letters and board seats and strange terms, and leverage stays like sort of where it needs to be, as long as you have a platform of multiple strategics and not just like one really special strategic that just has to get in right now. So learn how to say no to that special person. That is all.
Let me add one point on what you say, and it's really interesting, by the way. You can often go and you want to take the name brand VC, but you also should really understand who is the person that will invest from that fund, and what is the positioning in that fund. Because there are many companies that I've been involved as an investor who have had real trouble when somebody left in a fund who was their board member, and then nobody really. It becomes like a toxic waste. Hadn't happened to us, but that's something that we don't think. We think, oh, it's a brand. It's like a DLA Piper. It's a big law firm, but you want to pick the right lawyers. Same with the VCs.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think it's very tempting to say yes to the first person who says yes, but keep in mind that person is going to be with you for a while, hopefully. So that's actually an opportunity to choose the people, if it's angels or firms who are also made of people, who can help you. And these are people who are the most vested in you, so they can actually help you the most. And at each point in the startup, there'll be different kinds of people who can help you. And so for us, we have some great investors who are technology entrepreneurs and investors. We're looking for really healthcare investors in the next round. So it really, at each point, at some point, it would be strategics, right? So at each point, I think you have to leverage the right network and be able to say no, because you have to have a internal bar.
Great. Thanks, guys. We're almost at the end of our scheduled time for the panel. I wanted to offer the opportunity for anyone in the audience that wants to ask a question. I didn't really see any hands raised during the panel discussion. If there's any questions that you have for the panelists specifically, I'd love to hear from you. Anne.
So what's the biggest mistake you have made, and what's the lessons you have learned?
I think it was for
Anybody?
Hiring and firing velocity. The most sort of economically painful mistakes have been hiring the wrong person, allowing them to stick around for too long, and not leveling up the team really at a very uncomfortable pace, I think, which is actually what is needed for a startup growing, doubling, tripling year over year for many years in a row. It's supposed to be uncomfortable and out of body. If it isn't, you're probably doing it wrong and it's too late. So those have been the most painful mistakes, just the lack of hiring and the hiring the wrongs.
Concretely spending about 2.5 years attaining something unattainable. The B2C in healthcare is very tempting, very interesting. There's a lot of money to be raised for that, but I don't know really anyone who has succeeded on deploying something for the consumers directly without the B2C to B model. And we were direct B2C, and I mean, I can give you many big list of carcasses who have raised a lot more than us. Some companies raised hundreds of millions of dollars and failed completely. So, you know, I was spending 2.5 years, maybe I could have done only 1.5 years and learned enough. But, you know, that was a mistake that, you know, only I could have averted.
And those are the kinds of mistakes that you sometimes don't get to come back from because they can be company ending. You know, the vast majority of companies that pivot actually don't succeed. And so, you know, although pivot is this popular phrase that's thrown around the valley a lot, pivots are actually pretty terrible and usually unrecoverable. So
I would call it nightmare. Let's rename the pivot to nightmare.
Exactly. So to survive that and to gain success is a real testament to the team that you have there at BetterDoctor. But I think that's a challenging situation to overcome as an entrepreneur. So better to avoid that if you can by being lean up front, really understanding the market, talking to customers, spending the time to figure out what it is you're going to build and exactly how you're going to get there. Any other responses to Anne's question, or should we move on to the next? Why don't we take another question?
So my question is for especially you with respect to patient privacy. So when you're at very early stages of a startup, how do you convince your customers with respect to patient privacy?
Yeah, there's so many things to say about this. Well, first of all, our patients don't just like pop into the clinic room and see their doctor wearing glass. Surprise! They're actually greeted at the front desk. You know, your doctor uses Augmedix. Here's a laminated FAQ in plain English. Here's the benefits. If for any reason you're uncomfortable, glass will not be used. And we respect those wishes. And when that's scripted appropriately, and it is, wherever Augmedix is, the patient acceptance rate is over 98%. So today, now Augmedix, less than 2% of patients decline the use of glass, and we're very happy with that number. We're very, you know, it's higher than I thought it would be. You also, I mean, another way of answering your question is how can we get your UCSFs and your dignities comfortable with sort of letting information flow outside of their sacred four walls? And I mean, that is no easy challenge. In the early days, we literally had to do so much of our work on site with people like literally on the other wall over here, just kind of simulating our practice before, like for months and quarters and sometimes years, before they would actually let us literally remote in. And then sometimes for many of our customers, we had to keep much of that activity onshore, oftentimes for years, before any of these health systems would even permit PHI and data to go offshore where the scalable model actually works. So in many ways, this takes incredible patience. It takes an incredible ROI value proposition story, and it takes very willing and you know, VCs willing to go through that process with you for many types of businesses such as Augmedix.
So did you start first with the smaller practices, or did you actually?
Yes, indeed. For the first sort of 6 months of real service, we wouldn't dare approach a Sutter. We had a small dozen number of independent solo practitioner types that were crazy enough to let us in their clinic rooms and put glass on them and just sort of prove points, prove patient acceptance, prove time savings, all of those things. And with those proof points, then we felt comfortable engaging some of the health systems who could then talk to some of the independents and then feel more comfortable on their end. Today as a company, now, interestingly, less than 10% of our doctor users are independent and solo practitioner, and we're completely transformed. We're all enterprise now. But we couldn't dare start that way.
My question is, how do you attract high caliber people to help you out?
So I think the question was, how do you attract high caliber people to help you out when you have a limited budget?
You wave a lot of hands. No, I think that it's important. One of the most important, probably the best way is you work with them before in some capacity, or the people that you worked with have worked with them. That's pretty much the best indicator, because there's already a relationship, there's already trust. and that's probably the best way. Beyond that, you're always keeping your eye out for investment or customers. You're also always looking out for great talent.
I think one of the fortunate things about doing a healthcare startup is it's actually really easy, at least for me, to attract the top caliber people. You just say what you're trying to do. Everyone kind of has a gut reaction that's like, yeah, I want that. Like, that should exist, right? How can I help you? And then if you're just very pointed about how you can help, right? One introduction, these two things, right? That sort of thing, then it's very easy for them to help. So you have to make it easier for them to help, but they want to help. They want to solve these problems. And I think it's from a very gut level for people in this country or in the world. People want to solve these problems.
I'll just add to that. I think a lot of it is just through your own ability to network and to meet people and to be charismatic enough where people, first of all, like you and want to work with you. And I'd echo your comments as well. I think there are a lot of people who really identify with the mission of a lot of healthcare startups and what they're trying to do. And for a lot of people, that's worth more than something they could go make more money doing somewhere else. And we see a lot of people who are drawn to that. And so it's aligning with the mission. And it's also just being out there and always just having your radar on about people you can meet and people you can ask. And one thing I've found is that oftentimes the people you're looking for are somewhere in your network right in front of you, and you just need to actually spot them, but they're there. So it's really just keeping a lookout at all times.
I think in the beginning it's all about hustle and trying to get people and promising crazy stuff and telling a great story. But when you grow, and I mean, yeah, of course you're really in a super growth, but hiring is like the fundraising. It's all about the process, all about the time you spend, how many people you meet. You better have a really good hiring funnel, really good recruiters, and you need to understand what the compensation is, what the package is going to be, and where do you find the talent. I mean, we are hiring 20 people now in the next 6 months, and that is mainly in San Francisco, mainly developers. And it is brutally hard. I mean, you can't get the people in fast enough. It's almost impossible. So, and I think, lastly, when you grow bigger, I mean, we are not that big yet, but looking at the companies that go from 50 to 100 to 200, you need to be also open to change the team. You're not going to be locked in as a management team forever. You need to look at your own competence as CEO or leader or founder and find out people who are better than you and be open to giving out of your task to somebody else who's better than you, because you might not, or you probably don't have the talent in-house at that time when you're growing big. It's very different when you go from 10 people to 50 to 100. The needs and the problems are different, and different people can solve them better.
Great. Well, thank you, everyone. Appreciate you listening in, and thanks to our great panelists and experts who've shared their stories with you. I hope you guys learned something and gained from this panel session. I'm sure the panelists would love to hear from you and answer any questions that you have after and during the lunch hour. Thank you.
And a huge round of applause to all our panelists. They're all